All right, so now I've finished up my black and white logo. I've saved it as a PNG. It's right here. That's the boring one. If I wanted to save this as a PNG with all the effects, I could do that as long as the background's turned off. So I say File, Save As. I save it as a PNG, but I can make it, number or alternate. So I save both of them to the desktop. And you can upload more than 3 files if you want for this assignment. Because I'm trying to find the one I want to print. So is this one more interesting or is this one? Right? You're trying to decide. But the truth is, in logo design, this is the logo. This is just a style of the logo. And you'll see that logos like the Mac Apple, the Macintosh Apple will be used in a variety of ways, but the core logo is just a silhouette, right? So don't get too hung up on that. Now, if I stay in Photoshop, this is also where I can add color, right? So if I duplicate and turn off my black and white one, there is no reason that I need to make the gradients black, white, and gray. I could instead make them really, really strong colors. Kind of like that. And I can pick my own colors, obviously. Actually, the rainbow ones kind of remind me of some of the gas logos. And they are ugly. So this is just playing with these layer effects, but instead of just doing the grayscale, using some of the color options. And then I can swap any of these colors. I can move their placement. I can change the style of them. Yeah, since it's about the Earth and Green Team and stuff, or Earth Day, maybe this is a better use. Make it noisy, just all kinds of things. So you have a lot of ways that you can color it just using the layer styles. But the problem is I can't color individual things differently here because it's all one vector layer without rasterizing it. And I don't want to rasterize it. You're not allowed to rasterize anything here. But what are some other things I could do? I could do like a color overlay. That's an actual color. And let that kind of bleed through. You can take off the satin or make that a much lower opacity. I can even make the drop shadow a certain color if I want to. So that's getting a little overdone, I think. Okay, so that's an option for coloring it right within Photoshop. This has just a linear angled gradation between greens, yellows, and blues. And it has a texture overlay and a green overlay on all those colors. So you can see those all right here, and I can turn them off one by one. So without that color overlay of green, it's a little bit stronger because it's a muted green. And without the gradient overlay of color, it's a lot darker because the base is still really dark. Without the outer glow, the drop shadow is a little stronger. Without the stroke, it just looks muddy. Without the texture, it just doesn't look as interesting. It's got an embossed edge, so there's a little tiny drop shadow around the edges. So maybe that's my color version. So how would I save that? I turn off the background, I say File, Save As, and this is now my color logo. PNG. Okay. But what if I want to color the shell separately from the chevron things, separately from other things? I have to do that in Illustrator. So I come back to Illustrator. How do you color within Illustrator? Well, first you have your black and white silhouette underneath. And you'll see all the shapes that come from it. So if I want to make the shell, this is what I do. I select all of those paths. I copy, Command-C. I lock the base layer. I make a new layer. In this case, it will be red. And I say Edit, Paste in Place. And now this will be the one I play with color options on. It still groups everything. Yeah, every individual path that's closed will always be its own path that you can find and select. You have to do drop downs and things, but you can do it. So now, if I use the large selection tool, because it's a group, it will still select everything. But if I click on the shell here, it will just be the shell. And then I can change its fill from black to a yellow. And I'm still just using web colors. Ah, but you see what happened. I picked a yellow and it turned gray. Now that can happen because we live traced this, and we live trace it as black and white. And this is a little pain. Illustrator tries to be a little too smart for you, and it's all about saving memory. So because you traced it in black and white, it doesn't allow for color options. So we have to say, select it all, right? Copy it, so it's on the clipboard, and then say File New in Illustrator. This is only if you live traced in black and white, and you just want it to be a print file. And say Carl logo color test. Okay, and now we're going to paste in place, edit, paste in place. But now I'm going to duplicate it again onto a new layer, edit, paste in place. Okay, now I can select that shell individually, pick a new fill color. That's a yellow, hideous yellow. Why is that not working? It should have worked. There we go. So sometimes you have to trick it. So you have to find an option where it gives you color. I don't know why this exists in Illustrator. But because it just wouldn't allow me to pick a fill color, I had to go to the gradient options and pick from the gradient options a color. And now it will let me pick, a solid color as well. Because I wanted to show you the simple things first, just solid colors, right? So if I just wanted a yellow, now it will let me, because it's a regular print file. If I wanted this to be something else, I would go in and pick that, like the green from BP. And I could always go and reference these logos directly. And so what do I need to do? I need to go to gradients. I need to force it to be a color first, and then it will let me pick it. So annoying. As a solid. And then chevron, what is it? Blue and red. So it's good to have a plan, for what you're going for. So I'm not even going to do the solid first. I'm just going to do a gradient first and then find the solid. And there's a gradient option down here I can use because I've been using it. Maybe that's what I want for my color logo. But that's kind of boring, right? And that's just replacing your fill. So what if I want to do something like this? I take that color kind of green, and because I have the black behind it, I can shrink it smaller like that. Maybe I want that. And same thing for the shell. Maybe I want it a little bit smaller. Let the black come through. But maybe I want that black to actually be red. More like the real shell. The problem is that doesn't work so well, right? This worked great because it's symmetrical. Because this has kind of pure symmetry. This doesn't because of all the overlap. So a better way to do that, besides changing the background, is to simply give the foreground shell, let's get back to where we were. The foreground shell a stroke of a color. So just like you can fill it with a color, you can give it a stroke of a color. So here is the stroke, and now I want to give that stroke maybe a deep red, and then I can make it as thick as I want. And if it doesn't work well being the uniform stroke, because you see all the points, it's annoying having to select each one very carefully. I can take its points down, but then I can also play with it being a tapered stroke, where it goes thick to thin, or it's an oval, and that looks a lot better. Yeah. The chevron's kind of nice that way. And then maybe this, just this little hoop out here, I want to give kind of a gradient. So instead of just filling it in with a solid, let's use these gradient options. They're not as fun as the gradient overlay options in Photoshop, but they have the same potential. So I just filled a stroke with a gradient because I was on the stroke option. So you can even have a stroke, right? So I have that gradient stroke there. It's kind of pretty. I can even make it bigger. I can select the right thing. Remember, this lock keeps me from selecting the one underneath. Make that stroke a little bit bigger so it shows up. Maybe let's taper it. Much nicer. And then maybe maybe I want to use that same effect on all of these. So I can show you the shortcut for that. I just select it. So let's start with the stock. And then I use the eyedropper tool and click here, and it will carry those same property settings over. So you see that same gradation being carried through. And then I can do that with the leaves. There we go. So there are a lot of advantages to coloring within Illustrator. There's one other thing I have to address, though. And when you add strokes in Illustrator, you see how it adds to the outside, always. So you might need to individually control them a little bit and shrink them to get your negative space to work the way you want. So now that I've shrunken those, maybe make them tapered, I can carry that over to the others using the dropper tool. I know it's a lot of different options you have. You don't need to take advantage of all of them by any means. And so you can see why logos kind of have to be simple, because there's so many kind of fine details to them. All right. Okay, so I'm liking that, but maybe I want to add a little bit of gradation, not just to a stroke, but to a fill. I can also do that. So for this BP flower, I want to do a gradation. But I want it to be more transparent. So let me pick a gradient type, like maybe the fading sky, which goes down to the 0 opacity, and let's do it radial. And I don't want it on the stroke. I want it as a fill, like that. And I can have a green outline around it.